afternoon. Welcome to Ben Lomond Historic Site. My name is Lance. I'm with Prince William County Historic Sites. And today we're going to do something a little bit different than our regular tour. Because it's June and Father's Day is this month, we're going to do a dad joke tour. Yay! All right, now I can already hear the groans out there. Why do we have to study more about history? Well, the real short answer is because history is important. Now some of you may be bored and studying history, and it might make you numb, but guess what? Studying mathematics will make you number. See, dad jokes. All right, let's start off with a good dad joke then. Does anybody know when a dad joke becomes a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. They're bad, I'm telling you. All right. Now the truth is I've got the dad bod. I'm not a father, but I do tell dad jokes. Does that make me a faux pas? All right. Let's get back to it. So a little bit of the history about this place and the building behind me is this place is Ben Lomond Historic Site. It was a plantation, but really is the way it got here is through the Carter family line. Now, the Carters are considered one of the first families of Virginia, and the Carter wealth was started way back in the 1650s when John Carter came over here at the tender age of 21. Now, he's not considered one of the Plymouth Rock Pilgrims of Massachusetts because, well, we're in Virginia. But speaking of pilgrims, does anybody know what kind of music the Pilgrims listened to back in 1620? No? Plymouth Rock, bro. All right. See, we're getting there. Now, speaking of pilgrims, we are at the tail end of spring, but not quite summer yet. So if April showers bring May flowers, what do May flowers bring? You guessed it, pilgrims. And what do pilgrims bring? Smallpox. All right, so let's kind of get back to the story of this place. So John Carter founds the wealth, and then eventually this plantation comes under his great-great-great-great-grandson, Benjamin Tasker Chin. Now he inherits this line. He inherits this land through his mother's line because she's one of the Carters of Virginia. And when he gets here, it's about 2,000 acres. It was originally called Cancer Plantation. It didn't look anything like this. This house behind me didn't exist. And if we were to look in the opposite direction, we would see that there were no townhouses as there are today. In fact, this was a very pronounced hill. And when he gets here, he is here with about 8 to 10 enslaved persons. They are not the type of enslaved who are going to build a house. So he goes over to his cousin at Liberia Plantation. It's about 3 miles that direction. And he says, Harriet, she had about 80 to 90 enslaved of her own. He says, Harriet, I need to rent some enslaved skilled laborers from you. So he rents carpenters, stonemasons, diggers, roofers, you name it. And so they complete this house in 1832. And I like to think that it is a monument to both the Carter family of architecture style that they preferred, as well as the enslaved who built it. And here it is, 190 plus years later, still standing, largely as it was in 1832. All right, so after the house is built, he's here for about 6 years and he decides, a proper gentleman needs a proper wife. So where does he go? He goes to church, because that's where you would go in the 1830s. And who does he find? He looks no further than his second cousin, Edmonia Carter. Oh, I know, gross. Well, this is the 1830s, it's totally acceptable. Also, keep in mind that he is one of the first families of Virginia. There's no better way to keep wealth in the family than to keep marrying within those first families. And besides, here in Virginia, we don't have a family tree with nice branches that go out. We've got a family reed. All right, so when Edmonia gets here, the place did not look anything like it does today. This was actually a very pronounced hill that the house sat on top of. And the main road was actually our parking lot road. And most likely, she came from the south, and as she came around the corner, she would see this big, grand house on a hill. And because she's from the Scottish side of the family and he's from the English, I like to say that, when she gets here, she probably said something like, "Aye, Benjamin, I love the house, but I hate the name. Would you mind if I changed it, darling?" And he says, "Oh, sure, go ahead." So she changes the name from Cancer Plantation, worst name ever, to Ben Lomond. And there's some good logic to this. Ben Lomond is not a person, it is actually a place. And it means, in the Scottish dialect, it means Beacon Mountain. And it is named after the Loch Lomond region of Scotland. Now, sometime later, they settle in as a happy couple would do. And, as they're sitting around one night, is, being English, or being from the English side of the family, rather, Benjamin doesn't quite get what the fascination is with Scotland. So one night he says, "Dear, what is with Scotland? I mean, if you didn't have your lochs, if you didn't have your glens, if you didn't have your Highland Mountains, then what would you have?" And Edmonia turns to him and says, "England, dear." So moving ahead in the timeline, the Chins lived here for about 20 years. By 1850, they had moved out to a larger plantation home a couple miles away, and they are renting this place to 3 Scotsmen. And the Scotsmen were a father and his 2 grown sons. The first Scotsman's name was Original. The second one was Sour Cream and Onion. And the third one was Barbecue. And we actually have their portraits right here. Just kidding. That's just to see if you're actually paying attention. In all truth, it was actually a father and his 2 grown sons, the father being an 82-year-old Andrew Sr. And he has a son who's Andrew Jr., 41 years old, and Thomas, who's 32. Now, it's also important to distinguish that they are Scotsmen and not Scottish immigrants, meaning that they are British citizens with full rights of citizenship of Britain, and they are neutral in the Civil War. So when the Civil War arrives here, they think nothing's going to happen to them, and that is not how the story goes at all. So to give you a little bit of background on the Battle of First Manassas, on the morning of July 21st, 1861, the first shots are fired at about 5:30 in the morning over at Stone Bridge. Now, being good farmers, they're here with about 500 head of sheep, and it's only a month after solstice, so they're probably already up because it's light. Being good Scotsmen, they're probably on the porch standing here drinking their breakfast going, "Aye, boyo, looky there, it's a great day for a fight." And they're thinking nothing's going to happen to them. Well, that's not at all the case. Give it a few more hours, about 9 a.m., this a very religious, germophobic former teacher, nobody's heard of by last name, Thomas something or other. Well, he passes by here on the same road that Edmonia took to get here, and one of his staff knocks on the door and informs the Pringles that, guess what? Your house is being taken over as a hospital, and you can stay or go. Either way, we don't care, but we're still going to take over your house as a hospital. So the Pringles have about 3 hours to move their best stuff into one room. Now, a couple hours later, around noon, that germophobic religious former teacher gets to the battle line, and around 12:30, he stands like a stone wall and famously becomes, you guessed it, Stonewall Jackson. Jackson takes his men and he throws them against the Union line over and over and over until finally around 2:30, he captures the guns, and that turns the tide of battle, which means a lot of casualties come here. Now, here at Ben Lomond, a lot of people ask us, well, when you're not giving tours, when you're not taking care of the grounds, what exactly are you doing with our tax dollars? Well, we actually do a lot of research. And just the other day, I was researching Stonewall Jackson's family tree. It was going great. Lots of good research until I got to the Civil War, and then my research just hit a stone wall. Speaking of the First Battle of Manassas, I have a question for y'all. Does anybody know what the Union flag of stars and stripes said to the Confederate flag when they met on the battlefield? You lost? That's not true. it didn't actually say anything. It just left the battlefield and it waved, because flags just wave. All right, so we are now inside the house at Ben Lomond. And this was the formal dining room to the house. It was actually used as the surgery room. This is not an ideal space. Surgeons actually preferred to be outside on the lawn where there's better light, there's better airflow, and it's easier to get soldiers in and out. However, they set up here because there was a rainstorm coming in. As far as the type of surgeries they did, by and large, amputations ruled the day. 3/4 of soldiers who got amputations during the Civil War actually survived. It's nothing like today, though. Today, a lot of people complain about the rising cost of healthcare in this country. However, it was nothing like the Civil War. Back then, surgeons would take an arm and a leg. After surgery, soldiers went from the dining room to here, which was the parlor, and they were put up here to recover. It was crowded, it was messy, and one could say that they didn't have time or resources to clean to modern standards as we know it today. I'm sorry, that's sort of a sweeping generalization. So here we are in the room where the Pringle family stayed while this was used as a Confederate hospital and then later by Union forces as barracks. They stay here throughout the course of the war. Andrew Sr. dies in 1863 at 84 years old. His 2 sons continue on here. In January of 1865, that's just 4 months before Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the Civil War, is the Pringle brothers sue the U.S. government under what's called the British Claims Reparation Act. You could say that the Pringles, they really had a chip on their shoulder about what happened. And like I said, they had a real chip on their shoulder about what happened here. Now, their court case doesn't go so well for them. It's very quickly turned out, and their case was canned. You could say the Pringles were crushed. A lot of people ask us, why did the Pringles lose their case? Well, they were seen as Southern sympathizers for allowing their house to be used as a field hospital and as well as giving supplies to the Confederates or selling them supplies, so on and so forth. But, with nearly all Civil War stories, they begin and end with slavery. And here at Ben Lomond, the Pringles were renting at least 6 enslaved persons that we know of. And you have to understand that these guys are British citizens. Britain had legalized slavery in 1807 in the British Isles. That means Scotland too. And in 1834 in all British territories. So these men had never seen an enslaved person on the continent until they came here to Virginia, and they were actively participating in it. So that, combined with all the other factors that we just talked about, is why they were denied their claim in court. Now, thank you for sticking throughout the dad joke tour. I have one more joke for you that runs off a set of puns. Now, if you're one of those who fancies yourself as a Civil War buff, try and follow along. That is, if you can custer up the stamina for one more terrible joke. As a rule, I generally don't find Civil War jokes very funny. However, today I have told a hill of a lot of bad jokes. Now, I don't mean to brag, but one could say that I have had a long street of them. And that is in the hunt for Civil War humor. You could even say that I have picked the best ones, but I am warning you, these puns are making me sickles. We should stop, otherwise you will be sorry. We should actually stop early, and by early I mean early, before we get caught in a web of bad jokes about the Civil War. Look, I'm done. I won't haskell you anymore with puns. You know, too many puns are not good for one's heath. Okay, that's too much. I'm gonna pope out of here. Enough with those jokes. And last but not least, speaking one's health, 7 days without visiting a Virginia historic site makes 1 week. And by week, I mean W-E-A-K. So get out, enjoy your local, county, state, national parks. They're your treasures and they're yours to enjoy. And don't forget, for Father's Day weekend, you can visit our historic sites of Ben Lomond, Brentsville Courthouse, and Rippon Lodge for a free tour because you're a dad. We can't guarantee that you'll hear any of these really bad jokes on tour, but it is free for Father's Day weekend. And if you really enjoyed the video or you enjoyed the tour that we know you'll go on, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and check out our website for more historical information and events. Thank you, and y'all have a great afternoon.